Holly. She's a Chinese hooker from LA. And you know what? I have a bookmark over here. Oh, that page. So the I character is the bare knuckle fighter. I lean back to let Holly massage my feet as she alternates between drawing on a menthol and gossiping. I lived with family in China for a year before I was able to get my way back here. I like it better here. She kneads her knuckles into the balls of my feet. I groan as she puffs a lazy series of smoke rings toward the ceiling tiles. I'm glad I went though, you know. It was a good experience, like formative. I think I'm stronger, and I know I can survive on my own, anywhere. I nod. It's hard to concentrate on what she's saying as the stress and turmoil of the day ooze out under her pressing fingers. She came back to the States a year later, when she was nearly 16, without telling her mother. She arrived in San Francisco with the rest of the Chinese immigrants, extended family of Chinese already living in California, visiting and ingratiating with the hope of outstaying their welcome and learning English. Bloken English, flied lice. She must have heard every joke there was in elementary school, and now she was back, and on the wrong side of the jokes. Home. But it wasn't the same. Didn't feel the same, didn't smell the same, didn't sound the same. American traffic, American voices, American dreams all sounded alien and sterile and metallic. There was no sing-song Mandarin murmur, no constant ding-ding of rickshaws. The roar of cars was incessant. She thought she'd be relieved to see faces that weren't Chinese, but now the color diversity seemed senseless and frightening. On her way through customs, she struggled to string sentences together in English, and her American passport raised skepticism. She was embarrassed. She was exhausted. She almost cried. With nowhere to go, at the termination of a plan that led her no farther than the airport in San Francisco, she lugged her bags into the nearest restaurant and sat at the bar. "Help you?" offered the bartender. "Pepsi, please," she said, relieved and comforted by the presence of fountain soda. "That's it? Just Pepsi?" He leaned toward her. His hair was swept back, but had fallen over his forehead in an arch on either side of the part. Oh yeah, this is in the 80s, early 90s. He raised an eyebrow and brushed his bangs back. "Here, have a real drink. This one's on the house." "Thanks," she said, watching him tilt a stream of rum into the glass. "How was your flight?" "Here, a Cuba Libre." "Long?" "Yeah, I know what you mean. Where'd you fly from?" "China." "Whoa, man, that's like..." He looked down between his feet. "A long way." "Yeah, I was there for over a year." "Hey, welcome back." "Excuse me." He moved off to help another patron. Holly sipped the rum and coke and stared up at the TV playing a news segment at halftime. Someone important in the Middle East had been assassinated. She didn't recognize the name, but he looked stern with squinty eyes and a bald head. Looked like great uncle. She had to suck down the rest of the drink to keep back the hot weight of tears. "Thirsty much?" The bartender leaned toward her, swiping at things with his brag. Holly pasted on a sweet look. "Are you offering me another?" A knowing smile crossed the bartender's face. "Sure." "This keeps my mind off the problem of how to get to L.A., she purred. "L.A.? Why didn't you just fly into LAX?" "This is where my ticket brought me, but then, now what?" I shift on the bed to give Holly better access to my calves and ask how she'd gotten a plane ticket, hoping to extend the massage as long as possible while she talks. She wasn't proud of stealing great uncle's jade money. For weeks she'd been watching him return from the market, dividing his wads of yuan and stuffing one half in a jar and the other in an envelope for great aunt's groceries. Then one afternoon when he went outside for his pre-nap pipe, she hurried over and emptied the jar, replacing it with crumpled bits of newsprint. Sweating and terrified, she ran out of the building with the bags she packed ahead of time and down the block until she could hail a taxi for the airport. "Hey, Nick." Her Mandarin had improved, but she'd never work as a translator. Some words just didn't stick. "Take me to where people fly, people leave. The air," she fumbled, hoping she wasn't inflecting anything awkward or insulting. The driver looked mildly amused in the rear view and shifted lanes toward the highway. "You visitor?" he asked in English. She nodded. They rode in silence for a while. "Which airline today?" Holly shrugged. "Any of them." The driver frowned. "Okay. Air China good?" She nodded. The driver read her the number from the meter. She counted out the bills and coins and ducked out of the car, tucking her bags behind. A doorman shuffled to open the entrance door for her. A woman her mother's age with smooth skin, thick lipstick, and a tight bun of hair beckoned her to the counter. Holly pulled out the money and said, "Los Angeles." There's no flight to Los Angeles until after the weekend, she said with a firm smile. I can put you on the next flight to San Francisco if you like. That leaves in 2 hours. Holly nodded and handed over her cash and passport. She tells me she hates flying as she works her hands over my thighs, rubbing her way up my lower back and kneading my glutes. I grunt in reply and try not to squirm as her fingers explore. I'm not a huge fan of flying either. I prefer my feet firmly planted. Fortunately, the flight was uneventful, except for a wailing baby right behind her that brought her to the verge of breaking down herself. So now that you're an SF, what are you going to do? The bartender held a glass he was polishing up to the light. Huh? Oh, I don't know. Any good hotels around? She swirled the ice in her drink. That's it? You don't have any family or anyone to pick you up here? Holly tilted the glass and chewed on an ice cube. I sort of ran away. What, from China? Holy shit, I didn't know you could do that. Have you been to China? China's a hellhole. I grew up in LA. Can't say I have. I once went down to Mexico, though, back when I was in high school. We weren't supposed to go, but my buddy had a car. Hey, I'm not sure this little lady's interested, Chief. How about a Jack Rocks, big guy? The bartender shot a fulsome smile at the suit-clad man who stooped to polish his cowboy boots before taking a seat. He was shy of 40 with the air of a former athlete who'd not yet come to terms with the developing potbelly. A ready smile, shoulders thrown back, head up, standing like he was always on the verge of hooking his thumbs in his belt. See something you like, honey? He asked, sitting down next to her. That depends on what I'm seeing, she said, surprising herself. The man's eyebrows lifted and an amused smirk crossed his face as the bartender laid a glass on a cocktail napkin and heaved a rack full of dirty dishes toward the kitchen. What's your name, kitten? How old are you? You have to earn my name, she purred. Where was this coming from? And I'm 18, she added. Duh, I'm in a bar. She's got spunk, ladies and gents, he laughed. You've got to give her that. I'm Elliot. He thrust out his hand and they shook. Where are you coming from, princess? Or going to? China. From. No kidding. Fucking A. He raised his glass to a toast and downed most of it. So what, are you visiting or what? Moving back to LA. No kidding. I'm on my way there myself after a bit of a layover. When's your connecting flight? She didn't have one. Not enough cash. Apparently jade wasn't as valuable as she thought. Neither was the yuan. With about $25 in change in her backpack, what exactly she aimed to do upon arrival in the States was still unclear, but here she was. She felt stuck between two worlds, still not comfortable in America, but not exactly missing Beijing either. There was one thing she wouldn't do. She would not call her mother, even though she'd probably already heard from their relatives the latest evil her bad child had committed. The ancestors would not be pleased. Whatever. Better not to think about it. Suddenly she realized how hungry she was. Take a girl to dinner before you fly? For a moment, Elliot gaped, but nodded with amusement. I'd take you to a good place in Chinatown I usually go to when I'm here, but you're probably sick of that. How long were you there for? She wanted a burger with cheese and fries and a shake and salt and a Pepsi and mashed potatoes and fried chicken that she hadn't just watched walk across the yard an hour before. Anything American that would fill her growling stomach and get her mind off picturing Great Uncle's kind, wrinkled face drooped in disappointment when he discovered her theft and disappearance. How about a steak, honey? Holly nodded. The bartender sullenly tallied up their drinks, and Holly gathered her 2 small bags. Both bags were depressingly slack, and she swallowed a bitter lump of disappointment. She didn't even have a proper purse, coming from China, where the communists scorn material obsessions. Creeps. Elliot took her hand and crooked it around his arm as they walked out the bar. An electric thrill spread from her fingertips. He was only a little taller than she was, but his suit coat was soft and smooth and warm to the touch. The way he walked, so different from the men she'd grown used to, the Chinese men of indeterminate age and absent assuredness, who'd come bowing and scraping to Great Uncle in an attempt to secure her as a wife, without even talking to her first. Elliot held the door for her and guided her into a waiting taxi outside the arrivals lobby. How do you like it? Elliot asked. French? English? Australian? What? Your steak. What's your style? Texas? She clicked her tongue. Stop showing off, she said, hugging his arm and smiling up at him. You got me, sugar. I just want to impress you. It will take a lot more than just a knowledge of meat. Oh, yeah? Elliot leaned forward and instructed the driver. Holly watched out the window as people strolled down sidewalks, sifted through garbage cans, dropped dimes and parking meters, waited for trolleys, hurtled and dawdled. It was all just people, but so different from Beijing. Even the concrete looked different, and the smell. San Francisco reeked of sewer and asphalt instead of pigs and bicycle grease. The restaurant was dim, illuminated by a single candle at each table, and quiet, forks clearly clinking over the murmur of conversations. She tried not to paw at the velvet curtains or the burnished brass trimmings on everything. The staff smiled and mouthed pleasantries as they passed, and she caught herself bowing low. Stop. This is America now. No one bows to anyone here. A steaming basket of dinner rolls appeared on the table as Elliot ordered a bottle of wine. She wanted to cram one in her mouth so badly, but didn't want to gobble food in front of Elliot. Instead, she tore off a half and picked at it whenever Elliot took a bite of his. She almost ordered a salad for her meal, but Elliot ordered for both of them when the waiter returned. And then Elliot insisted on drinks at the club he knew. But I don't have my ID, she apologized, trying not to panic. Sure you do, honey. You must have had a passport, right? Yeah, but what? Drinks are on me. But, well, I'm not actually 18 yet. Elliot's lips pressed together and he worked his jaw. Well, all right, when do you turn 18 then? December of 83. Fuck me running, he peered at her. Are you serious? She nodded. Elliot sat back in the booth. He toyed with the fountain pen he'd used to sign the bill. She apologized and he waved it off. So, almost 16? She nodded again and reached across to touch his hand. His gaze met hers and he squeezed her fingers. Let me buy you a ticket to L.A. I hate to see a kid on her own like this. You're too pretty to be alone. It's a dangerous world. He held up a hand as she pretended to protest. I travel all the time for business. I'm in this new program that gives points to frequent flyers. I won't take no for an answer. She smiled sweetly. If you insist, Elliot. On the way out, he hesitated before putting a protective arm around her. The hostess bade them a good evening, and a light fog greeted them on the street. As it happens, he said, my flight's not till tomorrow morning. I'm up in a hotel for tonight. You got somewhere to stay? He fidgeted with a button above his belt. Then he stopped. He took her shoulders and bent his knees slightly so his eyes were level with hers. They darted back and forth and then narrowed. He leaned in and kissed her, pressing her back against the brick building. Age is just a number, right? He breathed, kissing her again. Holly kissed him back and then tentatively rested her hand on the back of his neck like in the movies. She and her boyfriend had just started kissing when she'd been whisked away to the Far East. But Elliot tasted better and felt better and knew what he was doing. And instead of football helmet acne on his chin, he had rough stubble she found distinctly sexy. Holly pressed against him, fitting herself into the contours of his body and doing her best to melt in his arms. It worked. Elliot groaned faintly and pushed away from her, flinging his arm in the air to hail a cab. It took several minutes, but he finally flagged one and they rode in silence to the hotel. This place has a pool, Elliot mentioned casually when they arrived, trying to maintain his stoic coolness. She didn't have a bathing suit. He probably didn't either. She hung back a half step when he retrieved his room key from the concierge, looking down to hide a demure blush. Then they walked arm in arm up the stairs to his room. Holly hadn't been in a hotel since she was 8 on the trip to Disneyland. Elliot flung his suit coat over the back of a chair and loosened his tie. She went over and helped him, undoing the buttons on his shirt. Suddenly he backed away, shaking his head. This isn't right. This is so bad. She thrust out her lower lip and leapt at him, clawing his shirt off his shoulders, burying her face in this faint musk of cologne, kissing the hollow of his neck. Her heart was beating fast, but she felt calm despite the heat rising from her abdomen. She pulled him against the dresser, knocking over the ice bucket and its glasses, and dislodging a watercolor from the adjacent wall. She looked down at the splintered frame and then back into Elliot's gray eyes. Now, she ordered, I haven't done this before, but show me, like any time before, show me what you do with women. His breathing quickened to a pant, face flushed and eyes narrow. Holly watched his muscles tense, watched him tear off his undershirt, watched his chest swell, tugged at the soft curls. He stepped forward, hands gripping her shoulders and pressing her against the wall. His breath ragged in her ear, a woody aftershave filling her nostrils and sending tingles down her ribs. She shivered when he pulled off her shirt and exposed her breasts. He caressed her shoulders, arms, hips, traced his fingers across the even row of short scars on her thigh, and he said nothing. With dry lips, he kissed her neck, chest, belly button, lifted her head back, and kissed her on the mouth. She touched his chin, tugged his hair, and let him twist her toward the bed. Wait, she whispered. This is her first time. Embarrassed, she pulls away, retreats. He takes her hand, whispers, shh, guides her head toward the pillow, black hair splashing out behind her, rests a hand on her thigh. Her first time. Even so early, it's clear she'll always be like this, always deceive every man she's ever with. She'll giggle and curtsy and nod and look down demurely and make him think she's madly in love, desperately lusting. But inside, deeper than where anyone can go, she's established a secret, a hideaway, a vault, where she exists in happy security, existing just to exist, delighted by the charm of her little castle. You can tell she loves love, loves the attention and desire always aimed at her, loves the appeal of men, the acrid scent of the masculine desire, the tumultuous need of the male creature. From them she derives her power. She's Morgause, enchantress, seductress, feigned innocence and diminution. She'll be the undoing of any number of powerful men, and that, when she understands it, she'll love. Perhaps seeing a hint of this, Eliot positions himself between her legs, holding himself above her narrow thatch of downy hair, aligning himself and taking a breath. And then it's in, a sharp pain that bounces up her spine and pumps her full of adrenaline. And then it feels good, and she feels open, revealed, exposed to the world, no longer sealed up, and she screams, "My God," and it feels good, and it stings, and she laughs. Suddenly he calls her whore, slut, pins her wrists alongside her head, bites her lip and presses his weight down on her, dominates, presses, pounds, in and out, skin slapping on skin, hot and feeling, and she can taste it. He thrusts hard, overdoing it in his anxiety to prove himself, biting his lip, eyes wide. And through it all, from that place within, she controls, allows, guides, using her power to make him feel powerful, thrilling on his trembling chin in sweaty desperation. Her body feels cold when he rolls off, skin prickling, exposed, hips aching, breast tender, throat parched, an emptiness between her legs. It hurt less than she expected. Surprised at the lack of blood, she reaches down, touches herself. Her fingers come away sticky and slimy, and she wipes them on the bedspread and touches herself again, feeling the heat, the slight throb, the rawness that wants more. Far down on the street below the balcony, she hears car horns blaring in traffic and someone yelling. A road crew works through the restful hours of night, tink-tinking away. She hears a siren tearing through an intersection, and she wants it again, wants to feel that power. Reaches down, wraps her fingers around his penis, thrills when it grows heartbeat by heartbeat in her hand, weakly nodding yes. Afterward, she knows, she'll remember this moment forever. Afterward, he talks. She listens. Morning after pill and secrets and his job. She notices and revels in his squirming, his nervous glances, the tingle of power when she strokes his palm. She can always say no to anything. Thank you. Next up, Jason.